Okay, we are back. It is 4:03 PM and we are picking up with public hearing on the 2024 through 2025 biennium budget revenue to support the 2024 through 2025 biennium budget. And passing this to Nicole Martinez, our budget and fiscal manager.
Thank you, Chair of the Board. Thank you, Commissioners. Nicole Martinez, Budget and Fiscal Manager. We are picking up with the proposed revenue and property tax levy. We'll wait till we get the PowerPoint up there.
Is this where it is, or is it a different PowerPoint?
It's a different one. It's the one.
Oh, hold please. Next week. Yep.
Sorry for that, Commissioners. Okay.
Wait, I need to share the screen. Where's my mouse? I can't find my mouse. How did it get full? I don't know what's happening. It's gone. There it is. Oh, goodness gracious.
Okay.
Like nothing happened.
Next slide. Thank you. Sorry about that, Commissioners. So the county budget process we follow is governed by state law. RCW 3640, 70, and 71 govern the public hearing process for budget development. It states that the public hearing must be on the first Monday in December. So yesterday, December 4th, we held our first public hearing, and today is our second. RCW 3640-80 requires at the conclusion of the public hearings that each item of the budget be adopted separately and by resolution. This is scheduled for December 15th, which is Friday. RCW 8455-120 requires a public hearing on revenue sources that support the budget, including consideration of possible increases in property tax revenue. The public hearings must be held prior to the taxing district's levies or making a request for that levy. And this is the purpose for this hearing. RCW 3640-90 requires that the Board of County Commissioners to fix the amount of the levies, and RCW 8452-070 requires the county legislative authority to certify the property tax levies no later than December 15th of each year. And so that is scheduled for our December 12th board meeting. An overview, once more during the presentation here, is our 24-25 preliminary budget. All funds, I'm going to focus on the revenues. So for 2024, the revenues are projected at 442.9. That is combined operating and capital. The general fund revenues are 123.3 million. In 2025, the revenues are 426.9 million, and the general fund is $119.8 million. So what are some of the revenue sources within the budget? Taxes. Taxes are part of the revenue sources. That's property tax, sales and use tax, special revenue taxes such as treatment sales tax, charges for services. They are garbage disposal fees, internal service rates, such as those that come from financial services. Internal government revenue. This is federal and state grants such as things for roads and housing, as well as state shared revenues like liquor profits. Licenses and permits, fines and forfeitures. These are for marriage and vehicle licenses, construction permits, court fines, such as speeding tickets. And also there are miscellaneous revenues. These are our investment interest. Transfers are also included in revenues, and this is transfers, for instance, from like the roads account to the roads construction account to pay for projects. So these are the type of revenues that we'll be speaking about. So our 2024-2025 preliminary operating revenues, so not just capital is not included in this conversation, but just operating. We said that our total revenues for 2024 are 408.3 million, and in 2025, 412.5 million. The major sources here for taxes and operating in the operating budget are taxes at 182 million in 2024 and 190.8 million in 2025. The next largest category is charges for services, followed by intergovernmental revenues. So I'm going to go into some of our major funds. The Roads and Transportation Fund, Fund 1190. The Roads and Transportation Fund receives property tax and fuel tax revenues. These are dedicated to road maintenance and improvements. The revenues are restricted and they must be used for streets, roads, and highways. Here, the largest source is taxes at 72%, and that is property tax revenue. The next is intergovernmental revenues, and that is from motor vehicle fuel taxes. This is shared revenue source from all cities and towns and counties. The next fund is Solid Waste Fund, Fund 4030. The Solid Waste Fund accounts for the administration of the county solid waste programs. The major source here is charges for goods and services, and this is for garbage and solid waste services, the charges and fees for that.
Tipping fees.
Tipping fees, right.
That's
That's what we
you
know
hear
as
about
tipping
them
fees.
as. Yeah.
And that's at 29.2 million in 2024 and 29.9. Collectively, all the revenues within the solid waste fund are 29.9 in 2024 and 30.5 million in 2025. So Medic One Fund, Fund 1290. The Medic One Fund is the operating fund for the Medic One, and Medic One provides basic and advanced life support services to Thurston County. The major revenue source here, or the revenue source here, is property tax. So you see that at 19.5 million in 2024 and 21.2. All of the sources within the Medic One are at 20.5 in 2024 and 21.8 in 2025. Conservation Futures Fund, 1380. Conservation Futures is a land and preservation program that protects, preserves, and improves open space, timberlands, wetlands, habitat areas, cultural significant sites, and agricultural farmlands within Thurston County. The revenue source here is also property tax, and that's at 99%. The next fund is treatment sales tax at 1180. Treatment sales tax receives its revenue source from sales tax, 1/10 of 1%, and that's 100%, 8.6 in 2024 and 8.8% in 2025. These funds are restricted for operations on delivering of chemical dependency on mental health treatment programs, services, and for the operation of therapeutic court programs and services as well. The Public Health Fund, Fund 1500. Public Health Fund is used to provide services for public health, including personal and environmental health, special need recreation, and emergency preparedness. The sources in here mainly are from intergovernmental revenues. So these come from state grants such as Department of Social and Health Services, so DSHS, also state grants from the Department of Child and Youth Families. Foundational Public Health is also found in here. Federal awards from the Department of Health and Human Services. These are intergovernmental revenues that we'll see in here. And then there's also property tax located within the Public Health Fund. Housing Community Renewal Fund, Fund 1400. This fund provides planning and grant management services for affordable housing and development and homeless prevention. There is sales tax that goes into this fund at 22%, but the majority of the revenues come from intergovernmental revenues, and these are from federal and state grants, direct housing and urban development, and also from the Department of Commerce. There is also revenues in here underneath charges for services, and these are for our document and filing fees for affordable housing and homeless housing that we get for recording. Storm and Surface Water Utility, Fund 4060. This is an enterprise fund. It's dedicated to storm water management and water quality improvements. The majority of the sources are listed underneath all other, and that is for assessments for operating charges. There is also storm drainage services. That's the blue area there for charges for goods and services, located within the Storm and Surface Water Utility Fund. The next fund is Environmental Health Fund, Fund 4520. This fund accounts for environmental health related programs, services, and activities and fees. The majority of the sources come from charges and services, and this comes from permits and other fees. Foundational public health is also located within here, that you'll find within the red area there. Intergovernmental revenues at 28%. Also, state grants from ecology and Department of Health are located within this fund as well. Okay, the next is detention sales tax. Detention sales tax is also a sales tax for 0.1% for juvenile detention facilities and adult jails. Funding is used for financing, design, acquisition, construction, operating, and maintaining, remodeling, and improvement of juvenile detention facilities and adult jails. This is 100% funded by taxes. So 24, there is $8.6 million. In 2025, $9 million. Land Use and Permitting Fund, Fund 4124. The Land Use and Permitting Fund supports the review of land use proposals and building permit applications to ensure compliance with Thurston County codes. 46% of licensing and permits comes from issuing of licensing and permits, so that's the revenue source there, and also charges for services associated with permitting, and that's at 47%.
Isn't the 7% the general fund?
Yes, the 7% is the transfer from the general fund. Okay, so now we get to the general fund. So 2024, 2025 preliminary operating revenues for the general fund. The general fund is used to record the revenue and expenditures activity of all general government activities that are not included within our other funds that are dedicated. Taxes are the major revenue source here within our general fund. That's property and sales tax. The next largest category is charges for goods and services. That could be things such as passport services, election services, court filings. Also, we record our internal service revenues inside of the general fund here within that category. The total revenues for 2024 are $123.3 million, and in 2025, $119.9 million. There is the other category. There's $6 million in that, and that is from investment earnings and from like ARPA. Okay, so we're gonna dig a little bit deeper in the next slide here about the general fund revenues to break those out. So of the $83.6 million in 2024, the property tax is $49.5 million, sales tax is at $27.7 million, and then you have other taxes, and that's your criminal justice taxes and your road diversions. 2025, you have $85.3 million with a similar breakout with $50 million or $51 million in property tax, sales tax at 27.9, and then your all others holding steady at $6.4 million.
What do you mean by criminal justice tax?
Yeah, so there's a criminal justice sales tax that we receive that's designated just for criminal justice services. We get about $4.5 million every year. It goes into the general fund, but the sheriff's office is also budgeted within the general fund, so it's used just for those expenses. Okay. So the next is a trend in the sales tax revenue. This is a depiction of from October 2028 to October 2023. It's by month. This is recording October sales revenue at being at $2.3 million, and compared to 2022, the growth is at 1.23%. October sales are tax that we earn is actually from the month of August, so we do 2 months prior. And the year-over-year growth for 2023 is approximately 2.36%. Last year's growth was at 5.8%. And just to also give you some more perspective, 2022, we received $26.1 million in sales tax revenue. We're projecting in 2023 to get $26.6 million in sales tax. And included in the biennium for 2024, we are estimating $27.7 million, and in 2025, close to $28 million. So the numbers in our sales tax are not necessarily growing exponentially, very slow and small growth. So we'll jump into property tax. Okay, so to speak about the property tax levy, I'd like to speak about the implicit price deflator, the IPD. The IPD is a figure compiled by the Federal Bureau of Economic Analysis to measure inflation for local governments within a population of 10K or more, and are limited to an annual levy increase of 1% of that rate. So this measures inflation. If the IPD is less, Then 1%, this is governed by RCW 84.55. Then the county cannot increase its levy at 1%. You have to increase it at what the IPD is. So our IPD that we got from the state is 3.67%, and so we don't have to be concerned about not being able to increase our levy by 1%. If it was less than 1%, you'd have to be able to do a resolution for substantial need, and so we will not have to do a resolution for substantial need because our IPD is 3.67%.
How do you calculate that again?
So it's a calculation that they do for us. It's similar to the consumer price index, but it's another way of measuring inflation for the county. It's required, it's developed by the state. It is a way of measuring if your population is over 10,000, if you can increase your levy by 1%.
Is it a state calculation or is it federal?
I'm sorry, federal, thank you.
It's just a different way of looking at inflation. And for
Last year?
Yes,
the IPD, yeah, it's the same measure that's been used since 2020 or 2000.
so they look
That
at
bill
the,
passed.
prior year.
was
and
right
depending
around
on what that
2000.
is. You could do the next
And
one.
we have no idea why Mr. Iman's initiative,
99, wasn't it?
yeah, it was forever ago. It called out the IPD instead of the CPI. It's just another way to measure inflation.
To measure inflation. So we look at that, we have to see what the IPD is to see if we were to increase our property tax by the 1%. If you still wanted to and the IPD was less than that, then we'd have to adopt a substantial need resolution to be able to increase
I'm
it
sure
by
of all
that.
that. I'm hung up on, first of all, we keep hearing inflation 7% or whatever, so I'm wondering why it says 3.67. That doesn't even sound unusual.
But that was the IPD. That was the inflation rate of the IPD.
For Thurston County or for Washington State
For
or for the
Washington
nation?
For
State.
Washington State.
State of Washington.
And so what I'm asking is that, is there something about the way that's calculated that would yield a lower number than when we hear in the news about inflation?
No, they're generally kind of close. But I would also say that we've been seeing inflation come down. So the IPD, if we pull up the CPI for all of, the same time period, it's not going to be 7 or 10% because inflation rates are coming down. And we can look that up. I can't look it up on the fly, but we can look up what the CIP was. But this is an accurate number. We receive it from the state. Does it come out from the Office of Financial Management?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So the next slide here is the distribution of property tax based on the dollar. So out of $1, 84 cents of it is used for Washington State and other jurisdictions. The county receives less than 16 cents. And of that 16 cents, about 8 cents of that is used into the general fund, but that portion is also split between mental health and veterans.
So that share of the dollar that goes to the county general fund is getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah, it was like
Yeah.
10 when I started.
It was,
Now it's 9 and now it's 8.
it was almost 12 when I started, 12 cents on the dollar. It continues to shrink.
Okay, so the next slide is to talk about property tax and how it's calculated and how we come up with our levy rate. So I'm going to walk through this spreadsheet just to look at the bottom line here. So in the beginning, to determine what our 1% increase would be, we have to look at last year's highest lawful levy, which was at $44,937,000. 1% of that is $449,000. Next, we'd have to add in the new construction. So the value given from the assessor at this point, new construction value is $914 million. We multiply that by last year's levy rate at 0.788, and then we see that that is $721,000. The 449,000 and the 721,000 is added to our last year's lawful levy to get our new highest lawful levy, which is at 46,108,000. We also add in refunds. We saw that we had a high increase of refunds of 474,000. So our regular levy rate is 46,583,000. Once we determine our regular levy rate, we also back out the veterans levy and the mental health levy. So 675 or almost $676,000 is for the veterans levy. The mental health levy is about 1.5 million. So we subtract that from our regular levy rate to find that our property tax levy is 44,405,000. We add our road levy shift. Right now we have in the budget $4.7 million, and we end with a tax levy of 49.1 million. However, to determine the actual levy rate, we take our highest lawful levy, which is at 46.1 million, and we divide that by the assessed value, which is at 60 billion, and we find that our levy rate is 0.767. And so we'll continue to get information up until we are ready to adopt and certify the levy to get as accurate information that we can from the assessor. But at this point, this are the numbers that we have. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to show is the levy resolution. So on December 12th, during the regular board meeting, there will be a certification of the levy. And so that is the first slide I just showed you was actually the calculation of the levy rate. This is the levy resolution and the information that needs to be presented on that resolution. It speaks to what the increase is over the past actual levy. And so this is governed by RCW 8455-120 there in that bullet. And the second bullet here shows how that is calculated. So the calculation here is last year's highest lawful levy. You multiply that by 101, so you're increasing it by 1%. You subtract that from last year's actual levy, and then you see that your increase is $394,000. You divide that by last year's actual levy to get your percent change. This is here just to bring to your attention when we set for December 12th, when we actually go to certify the levy, the language that you could see in that compared to the actual calculation that was done before. They may look different, so I just wanted to be able to show you both of the ways that they'll be shown.
Right.
Okay.
We want to acknowledge that the calculation of the property tax is very confusing. It's not a straightforward thing. People think that it's the rate that can go up by 1%. It's not. It's the highest lawful levy. People think that if their house values go up by 20%, their property tax is going to go up by 20%, but it's not, because we back into a rate. And then the resolution further confounds things, because the way we are instructed by the Department of Revenue to calculate what goes in the resolution comes up with completely different numbers than we use in calculating the total levy. So we try to present these slides that show how the levy is calculated and then what goes into the resolution, so that neither you nor the public is surprised when these things are very different.
Thank you. So then the next slide here is to speak to the trends for the tax rate and levy trends. And so the first chart here is the property value, so your assessed value. You see as your property value from 2021 to 2024 is increasing, but then the chart right below that is actually your tax rate or your tax rate, and so that is actually decreasing. So as your assessed value is increasing, your tax or your levy rate is decreasing. And so that is something that I believe Robin has spoke to many times about how that can be a little confusing to the public. So we wanted to just show that again, as your assessed values are increasing, your actual rate is not increasing, it's decreasing. And then the amount that is collected is your levy. And so you can see that in 2021 to 2024, that is actually growing. Okay. So the next slide here is your property tax payments. So this is to show, I've been able to go onto Redfin and look at June's numbers on what the home values were dating back from 2019 to 2023. And then I applied our levy rate there to be able to figure out what our general fund tax would be on someone's home value at the median home price. In 2024, we see that the home price may increase by 2.5% based on the assessor's information, his letter online. So I plugged that number in as your home value and the rate that we are proposing to show that the general fund tax amount and that the increase is $1.15. It's decreasing for the average home owner.
This is if they were only paying the general fund part of their levy.
That is correct. It's just the general fund. Okay, so then the next slide. At yesterday's public hearing, I showed this slide, and this showed our 24-25 fund balance, and also well, this graph has lots of information included in it, so I'll speak to it again. The red line is the expenditures. The green dotted line there is your total revenues. And the bright yellow bars, 24 and 25, that's the biennium, and that's your fund balance. The blue line that goes across the green lines there, that is your minimum fund balance. And then the horizontal line all the way at the bottom that's very dark is your cash flow line. And to bring this up during this presentation is to just show the difference between your expenses and your revenues, that gap there. And even when we're increasing 1% for property tax and we see small growth in sales tax inside of our general fund, we can still see that there is a gap between our expenses and our revenues. And so one of the last slides I have for today is just board actions. No board action today, but those that will be coming up. We'll be asking for December 12th for you to consider increasing the property tax by 1% and then to adopt the property tax levies that are certified, to certify them to the county assessor. Okay, so that's all the information I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions for Nicole?
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
On page 18,
I can't really claim credit for all that.
under other financing sources, in 24, it's 2.5 million, and in 25, it's 175,000. I take it there's some ARPA money or something in there.
That is
But
correct.
shouldn't we be receiving pretty good interest income?
So in other financing,
Yeah.
that $2 million is ARPA,
Yes.
and your interest is in all other.
Oh, it's an all other. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Good.
I have a question, actually. The criminal justice tax that we talked about earlier, is that different than the detention tax that you mentioned on one of your slides?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And are they both 1/10, 1%?
Yes, they are.
Okay, thank you.
I rarely remember us talking about the criminal justice tax. That's why I kind of,
Criminal justice tax has been in place for years and years
yeah.
and gets deposited into the general fund.
Mhm.
I didn't think that it was 1/10 of 1%, but we'll check and see. We'll double check that.
It's not one we talk about much, at least.
It's not. It's buried in the general fund and we just code it all to uses of the sheriff. Because we're required to spend it all on criminal justice. And it's easy to show that the sheriff's budget is way more than what we get for that tax. And it goes to the sheriff.
Can I mean, as the public safety tax, you know, I can see that before as we didn't have a public safety tax, but now that there is a public safety tax and we are hearing from the courts, you know, the impact that they're going to be receiving as well, like, I feel like that is also an avenue, so
You could devote it to any legal purpose within the system, but if we're gonna use that for some other purpose, then we have to fill in and that it's roughly, what, 4 million a year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, $4 million from somewhere else would have to support the sheriff.
MRSC has a great page on sales and use taxes in Washington
Excellent
State that maybe you could send to all of us, and it lists out all the different types and the maximum amounts and how it can be used and.
Yep.
For sure.
Sure,
We can
happy to
definitely send that
provide that.
I guess I would point out, there's quite a difference though between what municipalities are allowed and what counties are allowed.
And it spells that out too.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah, it's excellent information on sales tax.
I can send that out.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, I'll open it up to the public, but there is no one joining us at this time, so I'll go ahead and recess until our 6 p.m.
Right.
4:34.